think there was someone waiting. Is Hartman?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Kirby entrance. Oh, at the door? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Steve Jefferson. I'm one of the project managers on the Jefferson Block project. Thank you for joining us over one of our town hall meetings. Keisha and Ayana will introduce themselves and go through the process. And we'll also have an introduction to our design as well. I wanted to let you know that we're live streaming this meeting. And there'll be an opportunity both for comments from people in person as well as from email that we received through that live stream process. So we'll reserve really the last 10 minutes for those final questions online. But otherwise, at the end of it, everyone here will have a chance to ask questions and have discussion. So again, this is one in a series of town hall meetings for the Jefferson Modernization project. We also later this evening was the official meeting of our conference. So that's the group that kind of advises us on the direction of the project. Several months and we'll continue this year. I'll quickly go over the agenda for this meeting. We'll first start with a land acknowledgement and anti-aggression statement. We'll do a project team update, which is kind of more the mechanics of what's happening. And then that comprehensive planning committee, or abbreviated CPC, will provide kind of an update on the prior CPC meeting 3. So you have an understanding of where we are in that process. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the strategies that this evening's and then a member of our engagement team will give an update on that.
Acknowledgement and professional statement. At PPS, we strive to strengthen our relationships with the Native community and Native nations. The symbol of this commitment is our land acknowledgement. These statements bring visibility to the First Peoples of our collective home. The statement is meant to provide information and context while also encouraging all of us to reflect on our daily relationship with Native people and Native experiences. We acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional land of the Chinook, Clackamas, Calabria, Multnomah, Wasco, Cathpot, Tualatin, and Malala. We also know that many of the tribes made their homes along the environment history and acknowledge the sacrifices they made. We also acknowledge the robust present-day federally recognized tribes of this area, the Gron, Spillets, and Cowles. In addition, I would like to acknowledge the Chinook Nation who have been seeking federal recognition. The urban Indian community is made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country, representing 400 tribes. The urban Indian community has a vivid history made up of people whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced placement, seeking more opportunities. Today, these tribes and communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be admired by their ancestors. In Portland Public Schools today, we serve students and families representing more than 750 different tribal nations within our education. It is our obligation to teach accurate information, past and present, about the impact of colonization on our students, all students today, and make visible the multitude of Native families and many diverse ways Native communities and families are living in the present. We encourage every person to reflect on their own history, understand the history of colonization and genocide, and support Indigenous sovereignty priorities and actions. Acknowledgement is one step that we can take to improve our support of Indigenous communities in the area. In addition to acknowledging the land and those that have been here since time began, we must also remember our stolen siblings from Africa whose labor built the vast wealth of this country. These two communities and the atrocities committed against them are intrinsically intertwined due to our existence within a white supremacist world. Everything we have is due to stolen land and stolen labor, and every system and institution that impacts our lives is built upon this legacy. It is our job to speak that truth into spaces so that we can.
So I will kind of just quickly go over, not in a tremendous amount of detail, so you can see the update on work that we've been doing. But just to kind of back up a little bit, obviously, a lot of what we've been doing up to this point and earlier in the year was bringing on the design team, the design and engagement team. So they're obviously up and running, and we're busy working with that. The next step was to actually bring on a whole other set of experts, consultants to the project. Some of those live under the design, but some of them are actually, as the owner, we bring on directly. These include an environmental consultant who has been doing a survey of the site and all the history of the site to kind of understand potential impacts of hazardous materials and so forth. They'll become part of the report of the project. Obviously, trees have a big presence on the site. Sites with farmers that's doing tree inventory right now. The survey and topographic map, which basically looks at the entire site and kind of figures out both the boundaries, but every single feature, exactly how the land lays out. That's about to begin. Traffic engineering is about to as well. That has a big sort of role in determining exactly how vehicles and pedestrians and bikes are intended to kind of approach the site, and we're working also with the city to kind of coordinate all of that as well. And then geotechnical, if you're not familiar with it, that's basically everything kind of below grade, like what are the conditions of the soil, how do we build here, and eventually, how do we design our foundations for the actual building. One of our big, I think, focus in this effort was to try to bring in new contractors like we do in a lot of these areas. Try to find opportunities for smaller contractors, for certified contractors. So that's a big part of several of these. Really excited about that. I think we're also looking for maybe potential opportunities to bring in students at Jefferson to introduce different, I think particularly on the survey side, it's a very detailed process. So it's just another opportunity for teachers to share lessons in the field of what's actually happening. More recently, we had what we call the sustainability workshop session as part of our CPC meetings 3.1 and 3.2. And you see a reference to that. Those were both the same meetings, but we offered two different dates just because it's at the end of the summer. So just very quickly kind of going over what we covered there. Talked about the question, what is sustainable design? It's a big issue, a big question for a lot of people. And the idea is to kind of consider what they call the sphere of considerations. And that when we traditionally designed in the past, the circle of considerations really just three primary components: budget, schedule, and appearance. And the idea is there's all these other concerns that people have, increasingly so, about health, individual thriving, community, resilience, the future, the planet, and ecology. The idea of sustainable design is that it really encompasses all these things. It doesn't, prioritize one. And all of this really is even more prioritized than it has been in the past, even though it's been a big part of prior bond projects. There was a recently passed U.S. climate policy that really puts Jefferson in some ways at the forefront to basically follow the new requirements of this policy. And I'm just going to kind of read a few just sort of important statements from that policy. One is kind of a high level goal, and it says the district shall prioritize investments that achieve the greatest emissions reduction while integrating climate action into our curriculum and developing a culture of environmental stewardship and climate justice throughout our organization. So it's really front and center, and we really appreciate actually the design team and their sustainability director kind of putting this kind of forefront of the project that they're talking. And there's kind of the pillar or kind of an important priority that's related, because those are kind of abstract ideas. How does that relate to actually designing the building? So one of the important pillars that relates to what we're doing is to reduce environmental impact and costs. One of the goals under this pillar is that PBS will design and construct new low-carbon schools and renovations that are energy efficient, resilient, and adaptable. And so I think part of what we talked about at that meeting was, this really requires kind of concerted effort from the very beginning of the project. We can't wait to kind of figure out how to make all of that work. Additionally, beyond just the impacts of the design of the building, I think you might have heard that there's kind of so another goal is that it calls on integrating climate action into the curriculum and developing the cultural environmental stewardship and climate justice throughout our work. So a lot of, I think, what we're going to talk about going forward is how do we do that, and it'll be both the project itself, but certainly the staff at Jefferson, like how do we do that? My role in the prior Kellogg Middle School project, we were trying to kind of figure that out as well, and so a lot of what we did there was kind of have lessons learned from that project. But some of that includes finding educational opportunities within the building, having educational signage about sustainability and other features of the building, so that literally teachers can kind of walk up to a particular feature and show their students kind of, this is kind of what went into the building. This is a particular sustainability. They can kind of, or other subjects they can kind of. I'll let Tisha continue with, yes.
Okay, so now I'll discuss kind of the exercises that we went through at the last meeting. So first we looked at some of the key drivers of design and cost, time, culture, heritage, as far as cost goes, it kept these generally conceptual right now, just so we could get into the exercise of thinking about these drivers as they apply to design. So, but just generally speaking, new construction may cost less than modernization. As far as time, construction may or may not take less time than modernization. As far as culture and heritage go, how can the spaces we design reinforce and contribute to culture and heritage? And as far as disruption, some of the things that might affect the stakeholders of the school while they're using the facilities during the construction. Like athletics won't be able to use fields if we do the track side, so all of these kind of things we started discussing. And then begin to sort of apply the thinking to these conceptual options that we're working on right now. So there's the option of a full replacement to the north, a full replacement to the south, and a renovation in addition to the south. So the full replacement to the north has sort of the biggest sort of impact of change the building and impacts to the layout of the site, the traffic move, et cetera, et cetera. The full replacement to the south is essentially getting rid of both the buildings getting rid of all of the buildings, but rebuilding just to the south of the 1909 building, and potentially using the 1909 building as classroom space while we're building in phases. So we're examining that option. That option maybe will building temporary classrooms. And then the renovation addition to the south does most likely require the building of a temporary space like and a lot of disruption to the site for the retrofit renovation. And so out of the exercises, these were some of the kind kind of summary thoughts of the committee and staff, and, participants of the day. So generally, there's been a concern of the lack of student input, and we're just continuously working on that issue. And we have some upcoming engagement which is student centered, and we'll be addressing some of those. And particularly sustainability. How is each scenario affected, or how sustainability affected? And yes, I won't list through all of these. The presentation will be uploaded to our website, but it pulls out some important discussion topics. So for today, we're concentrating on culture and heritage. As you can imagine, this topic has kind of emerged as a very important variable for this project. So we decided to pull it out and concentrate on it in a session so that we can really understand what's important to the community from the culture and heritage standpoint. So we have a discussion piece and then a collaging exercise with the combination image and word cards to kind of be able to distill and communicate what's important to the community. And then for supply, we'll be beginning to use the high education aspects and the current proposed Jefferson space program, which is in flux continuously throughout we're having various stakeholder meetings with staff, and then comparing that with what Jefferson currently has. And so we'll be introducing those concepts sort of at the end of this session to discuss more in detail at CPC 5. And so this is most of you are becoming familiar with our schedule of meetings. So here we are today, a little past the halfway mark for our CPC process for CPC 4. And we have started our steering committee engagement. We've had one meeting, another meeting next week. And then this is our town hall that we're at today. We're actually preparing for a community design workshop, which will be sort of 2 people session that you can choose which one you want to come to, and then there's sort of a table for those to make a specific time. We're working that out, and that information will be forthcoming on the workshop.
Hey y'all, my name is Kareem Hassanain and I am with Co-Locate Design. I'm here with you. We are doing the community engagement work on this project. Can everybody hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is a quick snapshot of what we've been up to. Before I jump into this though, I'll share a little bit for those of you who haven't heard or aren't familiar about the approach that we take to community engagement. So Co-Locate is a nonprofit design justice practice, which means our focus is on using the tools of architecture and design to further racial, social, and cultural justice, recognizing that the practice of architecture has done a profound amount of harm to communities of color and of culture, and that it's really incumbent upon us within the industry to change that. So we take a community organizing approach to the engagement work that we do. We are not a traditional or typical engagement consultant. What that means is that on every project that we do, we have a program called Community Design Organizers or Advocates, where we bring in folks from the communities that are most impacted by a project. They get a stipend, and through their experience, lived experience, expertise as members of the impacted community within and around a project, they're drawing on their own relationships, having conversations with folks in their friends and family networks, the organizations they're a part of, their church or a house of worship. So we've got 7 folks on our team in this community design organizer program, which are doing their work alongside what the committee is doing. And our team, as well as myself and others from Colocate, are out at various events around the community. So we've been at the Juneteenth Festival, Good in the Hood. We've been to a number of different schools, theater schools in the district, showing up where folks are already at rather than asking everybody to try to come to these meetings. And asking what are folks' experiences around Jeff, getting the resources that you need. What are the positive associations that you have with this space? What is meaningful about this building and this place to your community, and what needs to change? And we know that not all of those things that need to change can be addressed through the design of a building, but we also take everything that we hear, whether it's about creating space or about programs or about policies, and we share that with the district. We share that with the folks who are making decisions. We share that back with the committee so that they are able to make informed decisions based off of the voice of the community that extends far beyond the committee or folks who are able to make it to these town hall meetings, which is why we show up at these various spaces as well. So as I noted, a number of different events, community events that we've been tabling at and talking to folks at. We've talked with student athletes. We've been talking with current Jeff students. Today, tabling at lunchtime and connected with a bunch of students and some SEI coordinators. That was really awesome. We've spoken with rising middle schoolers at middle schools, talking to community elders and alumni, parents, teachers, retired staff, speaking with folks from the Latino community, from the Black community. We connected with Latino Network earlier this morning. Jefferson dancers, SEI staff, and that's not an exhaustive list. That's just to illustrate where we've been so far. What we're working on is a number of different efforts. So Steve and Keisha mentioned the community design workshop that's going to be on October 15th. So mark your calendars for that. We may have some flyers here tonight. But in addition to that, we will be tabling at Homecoming on October 7th. One of our community design organizers, who was a long-time employee, worked at Jeff for over 20 years, knows a lot of folks, and we're going to be doing video interviews. If you have a story that you want to share about what Jeff means to you, what you want to see happen with this space, you come and share your vision. First 100 folks that show up will have $10 Starbucks gift cards to give out. Just as a little incentive, but we'll also be organizing, one of our other organizers is working on putting together a barbecue in early October that will take place in the cafeteria here. It's probably going to be a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night. And more details will be shared out about that as well. We're working on student focus groups, alumni focus groups, youth engagement events, more broadly, teacher focus groups, focusing on staff and program partners, and connecting with community-based organizations, including the Black Parent Initiative, Urban League, Hacienda, Bronco, and some others. So we're trying to get out and I hope have as many of these conversations as we can and understand what will make Jeff a more just and equitable space as a building, but also the programs and the policies that govern how people access these resources in the space, recognizing how deeply rooted the Black and Brown communities are in Portland within this particular building. So this is a little snapshot of some comments that we've been getting in the conversations that we have. It's not exhaustive, but this just illustrates some of the themes that have come up. So it's probably a little small to see, but from some youth conversations about the name, and I recognize that PPS is developing a name change process separate from the building design process, but because that's something that comes up, obviously they're connected in a lot of folks' minds. Recognizing the value and the weight that Jeff as a name has to the elders and the alumni who've been here, we recognize it as Jeff, but also recognizing that Thomas Jefferson was, yes, a slaveholder, racist, and not someone that we want to celebrate, or that the community wants to celebrate. That will be something to navigate in this process. Other things that have come up are recognizing that the building currently is not necessarily safe or conducive to the student experience feeling healthy, feeling welcomed or feeling valued, and not just students, but staff, faculty, program partners as well. A concern that continuously has been coming up and that we'll have to address through the course of this project is what to do about the fact that the existing building conditions are what they are while we're working towards this new building. And that's, again, something that PPS and the design. There is concern about disrupting the continuity of connection to this place for the community. Heard a lot of concern around if you do tear the building, all the buildings down completely, then is it really still Jeff when you put a new building up? And what would it look like to really honor culture and heritage with the existing building? How much or what needs to be preserved or saved and modernized and updated in addition to new spaces, as well as hearing from folks that some folks feel like nothing about the current building works and they're open to the idea of a new building. But we also want, that comment about how to maintain connection to place and rootedness in this building or in this space spans generations. It's not just something that we've heard from the elders and the alumni. It's also something that we have been hearing increasingly in conversations that to speak that into this space. But you can see comments about ceiling tiles have fallen, or like the air conditioner is not great, or things along those lines. But the things that people value are there's art, there's murals, there's like a reflection of my community and my culture here, and we want to see that continue into the new building, as well as concerns about how enrollment will like fluctuate or change during the process of tearing down, building new, the disruption that happens in that process. A little grainy up here, and my eyesight is getting worse, but a lot of praise for teachers, a lot of recognition that they're doing a ton of work without necessarily having all the resources that they need to do that work, but a desire to see more culturally responsive curriculum and pedagogy, more teachers of color reflecting the student population here, and in kind of line with that sustainability piece and how building a sustainable building is also an educational opportunity. We've been hearing more and more a desire for educational opportunities around culture and heritage and making sure that the younger generations are connected to the history, knowing that especially the Black community in Portland has been displaced through processes of redlining, gentrification, and that this neighborhood no longer looks familiar to many of the folks who grew up here and went to school here in past generations. So how does Jeff continue to be a place that resonates and feels familiar as a neighbor? So this is a little highlight of some of the themes that we've been hearing. Every comment that we get, we sort of look for these what we call themes and narratives, and they build up over time the more conversations that we have. This is a snapshot of what some of those are. We spoke to some of them already, but creating welcoming and accessible spaces for students in their communities. What does that mean? Right now, where do students have to hang out at this building? Or where do their parents have to hang out? Caregivers. It's a lot of hallways and stairwells, and some of those spaces are valued, but we can create spaces that don't make you feel like you're just hanging out in the middle of something. Creating a range of types of gathering spaces. So honoring cultural histories, acknowledging injustices, not trying to paper over that or erase that, but also not only fixating on those histories of injustice, but also acknowledging and recognizing the deep work that the community has done to keep Jeff here, right? That this school wouldn't have been torn down, has been at risk of being removed multiple times in the past, and it was through the organizing and advocacy of the community around Jeff that it was able to preserve. So that needs to be celebrated and visualized. We've also heard a lot about wanting to invest in CTE, career technical education, and STEM, science, technology, engineering, learning environments, life skill applications. Heard a lot about the TV studio and like what could that be in the future, knowing that it's not currently used very much at this moment, but media is a tremendous industry and a ton of opportunities for learning and career paths in that space. Also investing in dance programs. So Nelly is central, but also film, theater, ceramics, visual arts, podcasting, all these different ideas that folks in the community have that students would like to be able to learn. And then some of the things that we've been hearing as areas of concern just about this process are a lack of general awareness about the project timelines and goals, which is why I'm happy to see folks here at this meeting and hope that y'all will invite more people to come to these meetings to get more of that information and watch them on YouTube. They are live streamed and recorded. There's also not enough information yet out there about possible outcomes for people to be able to give their input. And so again, that's the work that Steve and Keisha and the project team have been doing to share information so y'all are able to weigh in a way that is informed. A lot of fear around losing access to this cultural hub with ongoing displacement and addressing this project. And those questions around how this project will impact current future students. That's a lot. There's a lot of concerns. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of strong conviction around the value and meaning of Jeff, both for folks who've been here and been rooted here for generations, and for folks who are new to this space, but recognize and feel that culture. So everything we hear, put it down, we share it, we speak it, we do what we can to make sure that community voices is amplified and advocating. The advocacy that community is bringing to bear on this project is heard, and working to accomplish those outcomes to the best of our ability with the design team. That's the next slide.
Thank you so much. So now we're open for a public comment period.
Then after that, we'll also switch back into the online email comments as well.
Anytime you guys talk about, I am president of the Harriet Tubman Modernization Project, location project, and also I work as you guys said that you wanted student input. You guys looking for current student input or student input of kids that school? Student input from kids that will attend the school.
I would say both current Jefferson students and students that will be students at Jefferson.
I'm a little unclear on the timeline of this. So what grade are the kids in that this will affect?
I think it's generally speaking kind of middle school students.
Based on the timeline that I've.
Fifth grader?
It starts at fourth grade.
Oh.
Fourth grade would be the first,
The first, yeah.
like freshman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you really want input from the students?
Well, that's part of the balance. I think some of what co-locate is doing is trying to kind of go to the school level and kind of get that direct. And the range of either school engagement that they've been doing to kind of understand kind of students in a general way that will be coming into Jefferson, kind of what's the mindset, how you, it's a tough transition, obviously, both being in middle school and heading into high school. So I think that's, in some ways, that's the difference.
Oh, sorry. You guys mentioned talking to theater schools. I didn't see areas of personal interest. This is not the grade on that list. Those are all theater schools.
Yep, we're working on building connections to those schools. One of the community design organizers that we're working with has been reaching out to each of them to try to connect with the principal and schedule some conversations, get information into the school newsletters. So that's in progress.
A lot of what you saw on the board was partly just what was happening with some in the midst of summer programs. So that's definitely continuing.
And if you have contacts at any of those schools that you think we should be in touch with, then please connect with me.
So that means that the school's going to be ready in 4 years.
There'll be a portion of it we're still kind of working on the schedule, and it really partly depends on whether it's a rebuild versus a modernization. but the goal is to have some portion of occupancy. Construction would start in 2024, some portion of occupancy by 2026.
And
Like-
is there a team of educators? Is there a Jefferson team that you guys meet with? I was on the grant committee before when they rebuilt grants. Is there a team that you talk to on a monthly basis?
Yes, and partly we're starting to participate in staff meetings kind of at the broad level, but we're also almost department and group by group. We're starting to meet with each of the areas, starting to met with today with the dance program, but it's it includes every program. It's sort of getting underway, big opening now.
And we do have that larger committee effort, which we are calling CPC, the Comprehensive Planning Committee, which has their meetings right after these meetings, basically. So yeah, we do have that larger sort of committee effort, which is full of staff, does have students, local community members.
And one more question. So, people who you're talking to, do they get an opportunity to go see the schools that have been redone? So, Grant kept the exterior, and then and what they did with it, they added, but it looks like kind of Grant, and the same thing with Tubman and Madison. And yet, inside, it's totally modern, even though they put glass hallways. Glass. I don't know why. Students go up there and wait, but anyway, that's let them teaching. But so it was really helpful for us to see other buildings and say, oh, so it's got our old historical feel, and they kept the beautiful wood and made other things modern. So it was very helpful for us to go see that.
Absolutely. And that's part of our team actually works to collaborate. Certainly in the past. That was absolutely a lesson learned for us. That ability to kind of both understand the existing building, which is actually for adjuncts. We're also planning towards which kind of represent both the newest projects, but also kind of one being modernization, one being members of that committee will have a better feeling about what we're describing. So, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm a former educator, and I'm part of the Oregon Alliance of Black School Educators. And one of the things that has come up at our meetings is a lot of people do not believe that this is going to make Jefferson, that PCC has been wanting this building for a long time. And that's why they're talking about modernization. So if you match with PCC, then for the public schools. Just saying, that's out there.
Yeah,
Just
been out
saying.
there for years.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
They've been
years.
I just have a question because I haven't been able to come to the meetings. But my one question is, so you guys have it in mind to redo Jefferson High School?
Well, there's several options that are being presented to this committee. And one of them is basically keeping some of the historic. Yes, that's exactly. So it's hard to tell here because you don't actually see the buildings, but these first two are a couple of the replacement or rebuild options. And then the third one is modernization, which keeps the historic pieces of the building and adds on. Completely upgrades, renovates those, and adds.
So you guys have a date to start the process of that? Of redoing the remodel? Or that is open? I'm just trying to find out.
Yeah, so right now we're still kind of in this early planning phase. At the start of 2023, we begin kind of formal design. Once a preferred option has been selected, and that'll be actually presented to the Board of Education, and they review and approve it. It's kind of a formal process. Then we shift into taking that and working on the design, and then we anticipate starting construction in 2024. Again, having some portion of the project ready for occupancy by 2026. A little bit in line with what you see with Lincoln, where the building kind of is the first thing that went up, and then they continue working on the site beyond students talking about it.
So, Tyler mentioned the, Harriet Tubman remodel, and I was just looking at the new due diligence document, because tomorrow they're going to be talking about the relocation of Tubman. And there's 3 different versions where Tubman is on some part of. Yes, there's one where it's the south field, it's one where it's the south field, and there's one where taking over Kairos, as well as the south field. And while their staff is recommending not to move forward with those options, I do know that there's some board members that are particularly interested in it being on the south field. And I just was wondering if you guys have talked at all about how you would incorporate Tubman if that was the decision that the board made.
Well, yeah, we do engage and we collaborate with the teams that are working on that, but for this specific project, that's not something we're really addressing. I think it's a separate exercise that kind of looks more generically. What if you combine with co-located middle school, high school, that need? But our direction at this point is really just assuming that it's a traditional Jefferson project.
We're not studying any co-location options whatsoever.
Okay, so then if the board decides and votes on it related to the Jefferson stuff, then you would at that point address it in your design.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about sustainability and resilience, and I'm wondering specifically about warming climate and wondering if there's anything in this planning process that has to do with the exterior of the building in terms of providing shade. Say there's a power outage, you don't want hundreds of students and staff standing in sunlight. Number of hot days will increase each year, potentially shutting down school time. Like, how has the sustainability been looked at specifically in regard?
Yes, no, I think resilience is really the key word in that. Understanding that we're both trying to address our goals in the district to reduce impact, then also understanding that there are impacts that we're already experiencing. So I think part of it is it's interesting during the sustainability section. People were asking about talking about power outages and things like that. And how does the building kind of sustain itself? And there are actually a lot of these efficient buildings themselves remain quite usable under those conditions. They stay cooler when it's hot out, or they kind of keep the heat in when it's cold. Having other kind of backup systems and so forth. So that's kind of what happens on the inside of the building. We haven't yet talked about kind of the overall site, but I certainly know that we're aware, and we have talked before about tree canopy and heat island effect and all of that. So there's a definite focus that we want to, I think, both help improve that locally on the site, and then by that in that way that improves the area. But it's a great topic. So yeah. Yes.
Thank you for bringing us together and giving us an opportunity to speak to you. I'm a resident, and I've been active in the Humboldt neighborhood association. And Jefferson High School is basically the centerpiece of Humboldt. However, the Humboldt Neighborhood Association wishes that a memorial high school to a racist Virginia slave trader wasn't happening. It's like, how do you modernize Adolf Hitler High School? I mean, there's a psychology that goes with the naming. We talk about the Native American losing, I guess, what each people recognizing names that they haven't recognized before. And that was one of the efforts that the Humboldt neighborhood would love to see. It's just, don't put your racist memorial in our neighborhood. It's take it somewhere else. We're trying to be progressive, inclusive, and non-oppressive. But if you're going to put millions of dollars in making some beautiful memorial to a Virginia slave trader, some of us don't get it. It's like, when can we get rid of the name Adolf Hitler on our square and our names? And what leadership is trying to modernize ideas that go back to colonial America and were very repressive people of African ancestry, for sure. If you know anything about Jefferson, you'd be surprised. Like, a lot of people didn't know that he was a businessman, and his business was breeding African people to sell. He had a what do you call it, a farm called Monticello, where he bred people to sell them. And he's outspoken about his attitudes about the humanity of people from Africa. He sees them as inferior. Read about Jefferson and you'll learn quickly. This is the last name we want repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated. We talk about culture. Can't we have a new culture? Can't we stop? We have memorials. This is a memorial school. I don't know that. I see it that way because I see the memorials to all of the servicemen who have died. And there's plaques in the north wall to World War I, World War II, Jeffersonian, Korean Jefferson. We haven't got to the Vietnam plaque yet. People kind of overlooking that. I went to school with people who died in Vietnam, and there's no mention in this history of Jefferson. We're going to remember the kids that lost their lives that we played in the sandbox with, you know. I'm sure a lot of us would rather see a school dedicated to the African American kids that died in Vietnam than after a Virginia slave trader. But that's one man's opinion. And enough is enough. I mean, how many times we got to hear this Thomas Jefferson committee, or we're going to rebuild it? Why would you just get rid of it and start with some fresh ideas? Real modernization.
Yeah, and that's
There is a committee or something
yes,
to do that, right?
Separate
Yeah.
process. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're familiar with what happened at formerly Madison, now
Mhm.
McDaniel, and at
Mhm.
Wilson, now
Mhm.
at Be Well. So fortunately, the process has been really well kind of spelled out and tested through those projects.
Mhm.
And we actually had a representative from ResJ department, Danny Rodez, came in. We're also going to provide a summary of this as well. But there's a process that we can actually kind of get underway very quickly, and it's actually, obviously it hasn't happened yet, but it's ideal in terms of our stage of the project, because it probably a lot of the same discussions that happened within the committee, the CPC, in terms of goals and visions, and we call them guiding principles. There'll be a lot of overlap between those, so there'll be, I think, ways to talk about it that really embeds this identity within the school design and kind of create something that is honoring someone that people really want to honor.
It happened a name change at Madison.
It happened at where? Lincoln. It's still Lincoln.
The students at Jeff were impatient. They wanted to get rid of that statue
They
that
did.
symbolized
They did.
so much.
They did.
Well, they got rid of it because the process is years behind the people. But I'm here to say, can't we organize for a beautiful modern school that has nothing to do with Thomas Jefferson.
I think that's the goal. Yeah, they are gonna change the name, so that's.
Yeah, take
You
the
know.
name off the, telling everybody we're gonna have a new Jefferson.
We're gonna go hand in hand, most likely.
So
New
the
school,
when
a
they
new name. Change the school, go to have a new
The
name.
name-
Same as they did with Madison.
Oh, yeah, the name will be well
Yeah.
before the bill.
Yeah,
In
could be
it'll
way
kind of
go.
align with the design process. So again, the advantage that we have that either McDaniel didn't have because it happened late in construction, and certainly Wilson becoming Ivy Weldon is an existing school building. But we have the advantage again of kind of aligning those processes in, embedding it into design. That process will kind of mirror what we're doing.
Is it, I mean, you're not going to change the name of the project. You're gonna keep it the Jefferson High School Modernization Project.
Oh, that's, what do you want to call it?
Well, call it the Harriet Tubman.
But that's not what
But
they're
that's
gonna
not-
name, that's
that's
not what
correct.
Jefferson is gonna be named. That's not what it's named now.
Modernization Project.
It's just, yeah.
North Portland Education Project or something. But, you know, this is gabbing people who are opposed to slavery and how the African Americans were treated by the slave leader. It's offensive. I don't think everybody understands how offensive it might be seen. But I imagine that if this community was hearing, let's modernize Adolf Hitler High School, there would be strong objections. People said, "No, we don't need to be there."
I wonder if you could speak a little bit about lessons learned from the previous high schools and the difference between, relocating an entire population for the redesign versus building an entirely new building, like Lincoln was able to stay on site
Right.
and then move, and whether or not, I'm looking at these options and I'm trying to figure out what factors to weigh in. Has there been feedback from staff, students who've been through that process as far as
What about the kids at Benson? I mean, they're gone, so what,
I know.
how are they dealing with this? And where did they go?
Went to Marshall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that traditionally, so that's kind of the model for well, originally way back for Franklin, I think. Then
Roosevelt stayed on site.
McCain, Roosevelt stayed on site. Daniel went to Marshall as well, and then now Benson. That's kind of the model there. I think, like everything else, I think it's improved over time in terms of kind of understanding the needs of a particular school. In the case of Benson, they actually, I think, built a whole separate annex to kind of incorporate some of their heavy
Yeah.
CT program, obviously.
Because they tore out the whole.
And then obviously Lincoln, I don't know that it's relatively new, so I don't know that we've gotten any immediate feedback, but I don't know what.
Generally, they were able, because of the way the track and field was, to separate the site a lot more. So and so that was a lot more seamless, and it would have been a lot harder for them to move across the river and to get everybody over to the Marshall campus. So Franklin was close. Madison, at the time, Madison was relatively close to be able to move it. And so, and with Roosevelt, it was a much smaller enrollment school at that point, and so they were staying in the old building, and then they were building new buildings, and then they moved into that. It was more awkward for them, and they were a little closer to the construction process, and it was a little more disruptive. So it's not seamless, but you kind of go with the best possible situation that you can. And in the case probably for this school, Marshall is a long way away.
Yes.
So and because of the connection that the school has to PCC and the programs there, you move the entire student body, that would be very disruptive. So I think the plans are to not, but to stay on site.
Do the construction people, do they work after hours also?
I mean, I think it really just depends on the approach. I think
They work, some, and they work on weekends.
Yeah.
And they do because of a
to do it within the time frame. I mean, it's all about time and money. Like, I mean, they could do it all at night, but it would significantly increase the budget. And then all that money that went to that comes out of the programs. So
You touched on this just slightly, I think. Right now Jefferson is a magnet school. Is it thought that you'll rebuild Jeff to be sort of a magnet program where the size it is now, or thinking that it may be a comprehensive high school at some point? Or that sort of seems like those are different build-ups. Their thought of that?
Well, generally speaking, it will follow the comprehensive high school education specifications, and that, just for people's knowledge, that's just sort of all the details of all the different types of program spaces that are in it. So Jefferson takes that and layers on additional kind of, call it kind of ed spec plus. It adds, some of the unique qualities of the program, including the dance program, the connections with PCC, a lot of the partner programs that have a bunch of transition needs and requirements. So I think the idea, at least from I'd say beyond myself, from a district perspective, is that these are 100-year buildings, and so we want to make sure that we're planning for the future. So it is built to that larger enrollment, but it also has all these immediate aspects that are specific to current kind of magnet program. Then obviously, we're not really kind of tied into larger decisions that are made by the community and the school and the board and so forth. But the intent is to really keep the unique qualities of this program.
And so is the larger number, the 1,700. So Grant was built for 1,700. They have 2,200 kids this year.
And that
Well, hopefully they'll do a little rebalancing.
Yes.
And they'll actually make Jefferson a dedicated school for the neighborhood and.
Yeah. And they'll do the boundaries
I
correctly.
hope so.
Right.
I hope
Correctly
so.
this time.
Right.
Yeah. They're horrible.
The dividing line. Yeah.
At one time it was
Across the street
North
from
Chamber.
Dr. Martin Luther King School that does not go to Dr. Martin.
It
It has the smallest
boundaries.
boundaries of any school. Yeah, so the most safe policy.
Literally on
Yeah.
the same street.
That
That don't go there.
Correct.
Yes, goes to Salem. And the
Yeah.
bus picks them up to go to Salem.
Well, back in the day, you couldn't. Shaver cut
right here.
people off from Jefferson.
Has there been
I was down on
any
Gateway. I was down on
suggestion in your planning for an aquatic facility, like a swimming pool?
that's not really part of the current ed spec.
I mean, some schools have swimming pools,
Right.
and they have the programs that go with swimming, Grant, Wilson, whatever it's called. I wanted to know if they had considered aquatic facilities in this new modern design for people that haven't had the opportunity to learn to swim, for example, cradle water. I mean, it's a good skill to have. I didn't know if that was part of the planning.
Part of it, as you can probably tell and are aware, PBS district high schools generally are they're within kind of the inner area of Fort very constrained sites. So there are larger sites like Wilson generally, but most of them are very kind of compact. And so more often than not, it's a bit of a trade-off of what are the program desires of the principal, the athletic director, and their whole team, and then the community. We haven't talked about aquatic. I'm not sure if there's really a future for that. This site, partly because we're going to be challenged to just fit kind of the existing, track and field and other required fields.
That's part of the educational specifications.
Yeah.
So we have a set of education that was created by the board and a community engagement process many years back. What modern comprehensive high school should be like. So that is not one of the things that is like targeted for all high schools to have. So it would be a special use event. And also obviously very expensive.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the design and what you're looking at, and I know this is a neighborhood that for a long time, access to swimming pools, afforded a lot of people, so those things rub. And so it's gonna be an opportunity for this neighborhood to get a aquatics center that could serve the neighborhood.
And if that's not in the plans, I think if you're looking for community feedback, that's community feedback.
Yes.
So it's on the list of things to consider.
I was told that there's a pool behind this library that's.
I heard there was gonna be a new gym.
It should be
Yeah, everything.
with a concession stand, a real concession How many stand.
floors of this school is being used at the time? At this
The
time?
aquatic centers he's mentioned are Park Bureau, who happen to be next to high school. So if you can get a Park Bureau,
Certainly the case.
they
of
aren't
Grant.
school run.
And yeah, Grant, I think it's adjacent property.
Yeah,
Wilson,
to
I
a park.
think was originally built as a school by the school, but it's operated, I think, by. So yeah, there's a lot of inner work.
All the pools are being used.
Yes.
Oh, they are?
But not all the facilities are active because of the low student resource officers in the building. There are 14 exits on the DNC, well, the bottom two levels. And there's only two resource officers.
Second question, since we're talking just a little bit about curriculum, there is a Mandarin program that comes up right through Albina Head Start to Dr. Martin Luther King to Tubman, and now the first year of Jefferson, they don't have their teacher yet, but it's supposed to be running. Are you including that at all? Planning? Is your
Yeah, I mean, we definitely will be. We haven't quite reached that level where we're covering the bigger program. Start to kind of get into all of the details of general education classrooms and if there's anything specific.
The parcel of land that's on the other side of Alberta,
Yeah.
are we doing anything with that? I mean, ever since I graduated in '68, they didn't do anything with it then, and it's been 50-some years. So are they gonna do anything with that land?
I mean, I think I can confidently say we don't know what yet, but absolutely. We are so constrained that we have to find whether it's field space or something else. Parking and, we are needing
That would be
every square
nice.
foot of space.
We come to games, we have nowhere to park.
Exactly.
That space belongs to people.
We talked that.
we were told it was gonna be a softball field.
So under there,
There's a gas line and there's also
Oh.
a sewer line.
why it's not being used.
It has, I think there's
It's like above.
there's limits to what you
Yeah.
can do in terms of, I think,
Yeah.
maybe an existing building.
There's the easement for the gas company,
Oh.
which limits what we can build, structure wise, so we can use the lot for fields.
And are all of the high school redesigns on comparable budgets? Or how is that managed if you have a site that needs more attention or is trying to accommodate more programs?
And that's exactly 2 years or 3 years ago now, 2.5 years. There was a conceptual master planning process. And that was actually not just for Jefferson, but for the final two schools. So we went through kind of a more compressed process with the community where we looked at a lot of these issues, but like at a very, very high level. And so what was determined, at least the preferred option at the time, was the modernization, which, as it happens, is also the most expensive version. So all of that and all of the requirements and all the specific Jefferson program elements were included in cost estimate, which then fed into the bond budget. So that's the process that kind of takes all the requirements of a project.
With all these high schools being remodeled, are they earthquake proof?
Absolutely. Yeah, and they're
Can we
not just,
clarify that, that's proof
Yes.
or resistance?
it's resistant.
Yeah.
So it's not just that you can get out of the building, but these buildings are now designed for what they call immediate occupancy. Because the idea is we want the same vein of building resilient facility. We want this to actually be a facility for the community after that life, so that
Okay.
you can actually use it afterwards.
Okay.
Have some things like that. The building itself has to be able to.
Because I worked in a building downtown we had an earthquake back in, I don't know what year it was, but I was on the 11th floor and the building just rocked. It just rolled because the building was built on rollers.
Yes, exactly.
So nothing was damaged, nothing happened, and it just rolled.
It's similar. It depends on the kind of building, whether it's an existing that's renovated versus.
Well, this is a phone company. They didn't want no lines to go down.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't want to be out of service. So
Yeah.
I was in the building that took care of all of Portland.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? So is what you're saying that if the modernization option happens, that it would be less seismically secure?
No, it's just different. The approach that they use, I don't know if they'll use what sort of bracing, but it's the same standards that we follow.
Okay.
It's just a different place. Great question. Thank you. And we are describing all of this. Part of it, David, we could speak briefly. We're trying to kind of come up where we kind of have these high level questions. We're trying to also both respond to them in person, but also develop.
Rolling FAQs.
Yeah.
Put these questions together and the answers to them on the website in a few days.
I am curious, so when you talk about modernization, placement, and you talk to all these people, how do you decide? Are you taking votes or how is the decision actually made? We're gonna do that.
It will be kind of a blended sort of approach. I mean, some of it will be a lot of the very important info we get from the community. They play this important advisory role. We also have a steering committee, which is representative of school, other departments, and we get a lot of input on kind of their needs and requirements. There's a separate factor which is completely outside of PPS, which is in Portland, which kind of will look at the historic aspects of the building, what reasonably we're sort of allowed to do. We've just begun that conversation as well.
The city of Portland, they care about historical. You've seen this boxes around here? I'm sorry.
It's everywhere.
Well, portions of this
Trash.
building are considered a significant resource to the Piedmont Conservation District. So therefore, there may need to be a historic landmarks review, or there will be.
Good. That's great.
It's actually kind of those two, 1909 and 1928 are essentially the two.
Yeah.
What is the oldest school in the city? This one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, it is.
So why would we chosen to be last? I'd like to know.
We always last. We got the last new field.
I mean, we're the oldest. We should have been first.
But I think that we could probably answer.
But we're not last, because Cleveland and Wilson. But we were gonna be last. I mean, okay, I'm not this. I just have, my heart is here, but it's not.
Last, Jeff was gonna be last.
It was, yeah.
What changed that?
That's what I had heard.
There was a board meeting. Julia, I was at the board meeting. Julia Brim, anyway, I can't remember exactly, but the next meeting, I will actually go back to the board meeting and try to, that'll help me remember, but yeah. Oh, so I'll tell you what happened. So right before the meeting, Michelle DePass asked a commissioner to come to speak. The commissioner wanted to come to the meeting because of discussing it. And the commissioner said, I can't get in. I can't make public comment. They won't let me in. So Michelle called Kara, or one of those folks, and said, the commissioner can't get in. She can't sign up for public comment. So they got her to do public comment. It's supposed to be a private meeting. So the commissioner got on and started talking about the importance of Jefferson being remodeled, and then Julie Brum. So do you guys remember that meeting now? And Julie Brum Edwards chimed in, and Michelle chimed in, and then all of a sudden Jefferson was up for remodel.
Yeah, people have to keep.
All right.
Yeah.
That's
I think originally for each of the bonds, there's been like a subcommittee that's created of citizens who kind of decide and other folks what gets on the bonds.
right. And it was put on the bond
Yeah,
because
so
they weren't going to
originally
be on the
this-
bond. They had no
bond-
intention of putting it on the bond.
First, they were first talking about this bond, none of the high schools, because it has been like 3 high schools, 3 high schools, 3 high schools. And originally, there weren't going to be any on this bond. And then summer of last year happens and then there was movement. So Jefferson did get on, and then the other 2 are being planned. No construction money, but there's planning money in this bond.
And actually, didn't it say that it was the Albina area? The Albina. At the board meeting, they said Albina and included Jefferson and Harriet.
Maybe so the Center for Student Excellence was also.
Yeah.
But anyway, it wasn't original.
So we're over time now. I think we're going to cut it there. And any additional questions, our email is on the website. And feel free to submit.
It's the website.
It is pps.net/Jefferson Bond.
Yes. We have extra.
Yeah, it's on the paper.
It's on the bond. For the folks at home. So,
I'd just like to make an announcement in case people haven't heard. The BESC building is now going to be the Dr. Matthew Prop building.
No, okay.
They say that
What?
they have one choice for the Tubman building.
Gone.
I mean, they just.
It's gone.
They just-
Why would they call?
they
Why would
just-
they take Harriet
Coming
Tubman?
off.
Excuse me.
Oh, they're moving Tubman because it's
So?
so close to the freeway.
So, but you don't change the
Harriet
name?
can move with
Well, they'll
them.
move, yeah, Harry Tubman will move with them.
How do you get
See,
Tubman
they-
name?
they change- Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Why would you change the name just because it's moving?
No.
Exactly. Dumb.
I'm sorry.
There'd really be an uproar around here. Such an uproar.
It was voted on last night at the board meeting. Oregon Alliance of Black School Educators did a presentation, and I diggity,